Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Alec, The Years Have Pants, subtitled A Life-Size Omnibus by Eddie Campbell. This truly is a life-size omnibus. It's fucking huge. This is by far the biggest book I've ever looked at on this channel. It is fat, and it was put out in 2009 by Top Shelf Publications, or whatever they call themselves, Top Shelf Comics. And this collects over, I guess at the time, it was about 30 years worth of comics, roughly. Eddie Campbell started off in the English, the A4 mini comic scene, swapping his comics at those little marts they had out in the street. And he, over the, did minis, then over the years started getting people publishing his work. Of course, he's probably best known for drawing Alan Morse from Hell. And actually, that's what gave him a comfortable life after years of struggling. But his Alec stories are his very personal, autobiographical comics. And they're amazing. They're a lot better than most autobiographical comics because Eddie Campbell's just he's a raconteur. He's a great wit, and just a really good writer. He's really good at capturing people's character, capturing those small little moments or the small little lines of dialogue people say that kind of give you a true sense of their nature. So this is going to be a very important image in the book. So Alec is basically Eddie Campbell. So I might be using it interchangeably, like calling him Alec or calling him Eddie. It's Eddie Campbell's life, but for some reason, he uses the name Alec McGarry as kind of like an alter ego. This collects all of these previous collections of Alec stories that have been published at this point, probably over the past 20 years. And it even adds a new story. Got a little blurb from Warren Ellis. There's Eddie Campbell, self-portrait. Well, the whole book's a self-portrait. I don't know why I said that. Nice illustration of him sketching at a bus stop. Title page. Is a little dedication, and the contents page. I love this drawing of him meeting Crazy Cat. So these are pretty much the books as they appeared, and he didn't do them. This book isn't in chronological order; it's in narrative chronological order. So some of these books would go back in time, talk about a time in his early 20s or something, and so he put it like he put his life in order, basically, if you will. We have an introduction from Eddie Campbell. And we start off with the King Canute crowd. This is some of his earliest stories. And this is about when he's pretty young, pretty aimless and feckless, and just having a good time. I think this was the cover of one of those collections. Part of the King Canute crowd. So here's that image of Eddie Campbell asleep on a turnpike. His friend Danny Gray has just left him there, even though he felt very guilty about it. We see Danny and Alec, how they first met. They were working this job together. Danny's kind of like a working class dude, but he's really smart. And he appreciates art and stuff. As we read this, we realize Alec / Eddie Campbell was pretty much a very intellectual guy. He very well read, could talk about art and history and philosophy, just pretty much everything. And, he didn't expect to find a guy like that at a job, a blue collar job, but he met Danny Gray and they become fast friends. This is their first hangout at a pub. And, Danny Gray's a really just interesting character. He's almost like, I wanted to say one of the great characters of fiction, but it's not. It's nonfiction. Though strangely enough, we find out later in the book that that's not his real name either. Just like Alec McGarry isn't Eddie Campbell's name. So these guys, a lot of these comics are just their like witty repartee. Because these guys love to get together and just joke around and talk philosophy. They're always pretty humorous, their conversations. Pretty clever stuff. And then, though, he constantly puts some surreal touches in his comics. So it's not just like typical autobio. Like we see this giant duck walking behind him. So some absurdist stuff he just throws in, which makes it a lot funner as far as I'm concerned. Next we have Josephine. And we see Alec at work talking to the secretary here. And then he's hanging out with Danny Gray. I really like his early art. He uses lots of zipatone. He loved using zipatone as a texture. I'll point out later on, there's some amazing uses of zipatone where he cuts it up and almost collages it. This one doesn't have so much, but in his early years, he definitely used more. So this is just about Danny trying to hook him up with some girl. Josephine is here. That's her. They don't seem to really hit it off, though. It doesn't really work out. A lot of these stories are just Danny and Alec, just like pub crawling every night, going to every bar in town, closing them out, and getting wasted. Now here's where Danny first mentions the King Canute. It was a pub, and it was like the meeting place for all of their friends for like, a year or two. There's that like golden era when you discover a cool bar, and you like all the people, and you just go a lot, and everyone knows each other. But then like people move away. It never lasts that long. But King Canute was definitely this golden era of being drunk. Yeah, once again, it's just talking about anything. History, politics, usually art, though, and literature. I love this. Alec is puking here, and he says he lowers his head and intones their names. Ruth, Huey. Which is like a euphemism for puking. It sounds like that when you're puking, like, Huey. He peppers the comic with so many like little clever things like that. Things he probably overheard in a bar, just from being a barfly. So both of these guys like couch surf all the time. They have homes, but they're always out getting drunk. So they just have all these really close friends. They're all also drunks. And it doesn't seem to make drinking be very glamorous and fun. This is the dating game, me versus you. Here's another basically story about his romantic interludes. Eddie Campbell, I met him when he was older at a Comic-Con. He was already like gray, but he was kind of like a silver fox. I imagine when he was younger, he was devastatingly handsome. And so it does seem like he doesn't have that hard a time meeting girls. So there's a lot of little romances and little sexual interludes in his life when he's younger. He's also hanging out at bars with drunk people all the time, so that definitely lubricates the situation. So once again, a lot of this is just talking about random people at the bar. Interesting little bits about their character. Sorry I can't go into more detail on these because the book is huge. This is going to be a fucking long video. I might have to split this video in two, in fact. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. See, you love gray tones and stuff and zipatone. He uses it a lot. It really it makes the art a lot more, I don't know, lush. Some of these just illustrate stories Alec has heard. They're anecdotes, basically, not necessarily about him all the time. Usually they are, but... Yeah, Danny Gray's he's kind of like a big lug, you know? He comes across as just this, like, working class macho dude. But he's really intellectual himself in his own way, even though he never went to college. But, he's just like, yeah, sometimes he just beats up people and stuff. But as the book progresses, we realize Alec is like, it's a hero worship thing. He just thinks Danny Gray's the shit. And I guess from reading this, you get it. You know, he's kind of like a rock star. He's a truck driver, and a lot of times Alec will get rides with him to other cities just on a lark. Because, you know, he's young. He doesn't give a shit about where his rent's going to be next month. He's one of those artists where it's not like my favorite art in the world. It's not like, oh, God, look how beautiful that panel is. But it's so perfect for these stories. Like, it fits so perfectly. It took me like 2 days to get through this book, reading it intermittently. And I almost felt like I was, like when I was washing dishes at work, I felt like I was in this world. He really immerses you. Like, I know it sounds weird, but I almost felt like, wait, am I in Scotland in the early 80s? Am I going to the King Canute tonight? Not literally, but kind of just this weird feel. Because I'm living in this world for 2 days. There's another one of the covers of one of the collections. So now we're chapter 2. There's some of that zipatone effect doing the tree here. He just cut up various sheets. He's also pretty garrulous, and he's always meeting people when he goes to new bars. Just starts chatting with people and gets in these great conversations with them. So just more bar hopping, more chatting with friends. And I know that doesn't sound that interesting, but it is. Like, the conversations are always very good. You know, it's almost like that movie, My Dinner with Andre. It's two guys at a table for an hour and a half talking. It shouldn't be a good movie, but it's very watchable just because the dialogue is kind of witty and interesting. Here's another little romantic interlude. He meets this young woman. It's the little moments like this that I just love, where things you don't even think about. He's just hanging out with this woman for the first time, and she says, "How about you, Alec? Where were you born?" And he has this little panel. When a girl of your fancy remembers your name, it's music. And I think we all know that feeling when you just meet someone. It's like, oh my God, she remembers my name. If you really like her, it's amazing. So he's definitely smitten with this woman. But there's a third wheel there, his buddy. So he's basically all like, hey, hands off, she's mine. Yeah, his early stuff definitely is tighter. He definitely gets looser as the years go on. again. The stories with Danny are always pretty damn good because he's such a character. I'm just sleeping over on people's sofas after a long night of drinking. Danny's talking about leaving his first wife. He just checked out. And then they argue about Impressionism. It's like very typical for this comic. It's almost like if these guys were around today, they'd have a great podcast, you know, just listening in on their random thoughts. So it seems like there's a very happy time in Alec's life. He's always talking about how, like, yeah, even though I don't have a serious girlfriend, it's just like your friend, having friends is the best. And, you know, he's really good friends with Danny. And they get to hang out all the time. He'll just do panels like this. Yeah, I'll amount to something. I'm sharpening my claws. And he scribbles. And then look at this amazing use of the zip-a-tone collage effect. It's like a stormy sky. I think some mountains are in there too. I'm not quite sure, but it looks beautiful, whatever it is. So a lot of these were published as short stories in anthologies, just randomly. So it's so nice to have this book, collecting them all in, you know, in order, if you will. So now there's a big Christmas party at the King Canute. Of course, everyone shows up. There's tons of accidents because there's black ice everywhere. Look at that, that's some fine illustration right there. So once again, now we hear about Danny's little romantic thing, which turns into Alex. Danny starts dating this girl, but then it doesn't work out. We'll see that in a few pages. Sometimes Danny gets drunk and belligerent and starts fights with people. A lot of times they deserve it, though. He's almost like a superhero. If you see some guy being a jerk to a woman, he'll step in and pound the guy. And it usually ends up with him buying the guy a drink after he punches him. He's that kind of guy, you know, he's very affable. Here's hay fever. And of course, more scenes of the King Canute. That's why this first book was called The King Canute Crowd. Just seems like every night at the King Canute would end in some kind of crazy adventure. The time here where they went across the street to sleep in a hayloft and the cops came. Because I guess Danny, for some reason, grabbed a bale of hay, so they charged him with stealing hay. That's crazy. Yeah, when I met Eddie Campbell, even though I just talked to him for like 2 minutes, he autographed something, but he did seem totally like this guy. Like, man, I would love to get a glass of wine with this guy at a bar. I would love, just totally seemed he seemed just like this character, except older. Once again, heading out to the King Canute to meet Danny. Seems like it was a daily occurrence in his life. Just working a shit job and going to the King Canute. In this one, the barmaid needs Danny to help her hang something up because they gave her a certificate. She never put it up, and the guy's going to come visit who gave it to her. So she's like, I don't want him to know that we never put it up. So it just becomes this big, goofy, madcap thing, you know, like everything at the King Canute. Here's another one of those panels. It's a plague panel. He lives his life to the full. No part is saved like a slice of birthday cake going stale. He's talking about Danny. Because that is Danny. He lives every day to its fullest. Once again, these guys are just crashing out somewhere. Someone's floor. Because they couldn't make it home. So it's just page after page of this. So I'm just kind of showing off the art, not really getting into it because it would take forever. But it is really fun stuff. Like all the dialogue is pretty damn readable and charming. It's just the guys are like, hey, let's play a drinking game. Let's name all the states in America, the United States. It's like so dumb, but they're all cracking wise, and it's funny stuff. He does a lot of this too, where he'll be talking about something, and he'll draw his own version of, like, this is a Picasso, for example. He'll later on he'll use actual photographs, and just show you the painting he's thinking about, or painting that's a resident of what he's going through. Because he's an intellectual, so he's always thinking about art and literature and stuff. There's a guy, a king canoe regular, they call a Viking. He's like 6'10" or something. There's another character. And so here's Alec. Starts dating Penny more, and she's going to be the love of his life for like a year and a half. So definitely, it seems like it's his first major love. Maybe he just hasn't talked about it. I love this picture. His dog seems to be at the wheel of this van. This one starts off weird. He says, a funny notion occurred to me while I was drowning. I saw humanity all pasted together with semen. It was running down legs at bus stops after early morning quickies. It was dripping off the ends of their noses. The word spunk is good English. I have always thought, at least according to the Danny Gray principle, where shithouse is better English than lavatory. That's the way he starts it off, because he's going to be talking about sex and romance. And it does seem to really drive humanity when you think about it. So here's more about Penny. He's definitely taken with her. She's a single mom. She's got a kid. He talks about all of her facets, She's a fun-loving bar hopper, and yet she's a very stern mother to her daughter. So now Penny becomes a regular with the King Canute crowd. I think she was always there, but she wasn't on Eddie's radar or Alec's radar. But now she most definitely is. Once again, dealing with some of their crazy drunk friends. Even though probably most people have like youths like this, going to bars, chat with your friends, he just makes it seem so, I don't know, almost romantic. It's romanticized, Then again, I don't know if many of my friends were as erudite as Alec, as Eddie Campbell, So we were probably just talking about really stupid shit. So more misadventures every night, fueled by lager and stout. Yeah, for all of his faults, Danny has definitely some faults. He's kind of he can be a surly drunk sometimes and punch someone, but he's got a big heart. He's a big-hearted guy. Next, we have domestic interlude. Alec hanging out with Penny and her daughter. Another notion occurred to me. Where did one's sexuality come from? It's not there at the beginning, like hunger or curiosity. I love this, what he uses to illustrate where does sexuality come from. Just this old-timey, like, burlesque dancer. Sorry, it's not like there at the beginning, like hunger or curiosity, planted like little acorns, so to speak, but visits us quite by surprise, transforming us overnight into something else, some formidable creature, and disappears just as it came, disconcertingly. I always see an old lady, and I just thought that was very profound at my age. I love this crazy drawing. It looks like a child drew it, of, I guess, sexuality visiting us. Here's another crazy thing. He's just telling this mundane story about him and Penny, and this giant teddy bear looming over the house, staring at him. He does stuff like that a lot, which is a good thing. So this is a crazy one. The King Canute crowd's all gonna fly over to France, a day trip. And of course, it's all them planning it, people bickering about it. Penny and him get into a fight. Once again, we see Danny. He beats up this guy. It's his friend. And because he's being all drunk and crazy. But then he carries him up to bed and tucks him in. So he's like, yeah, I had to beat him up, but he's my pal. Danny always seems to have a different girlfriend in every story. So they have this fun day in France, though him and Penny don't really get along that well. Well, they do sometimes, but Penny's kind of a grump. He was all, I believe these are drawn from actual photos that Eddie Campbell took. Of course, trouble ensues. Eddie Campbell gets arrested. The gendarmes show up. And here's what, I guess he almost drowned at one point. He got cramps or something. And then we get to see a little bit about his childhood. He's dreaming, and we kind of see a flashback. Talking about some soccer match he had. I know Eddie Campbell has used assistants. He will in this book. We'll see it in the future. But this almost doesn't look like him, because it almost looks like his pal Phil Elliott came in, another great English cartoonist. I wonder if he helped him out with this, because it really looks different. But it really fits the childhood glee of the scene. Once again, he wakes up in some place he doesn't know where he is. Oh yeah, it's the prison. That giant teddy bear again. He followed him to France. A little bit about Alec's job. Alec likes his menial labor because it gives him time to think. He doesn't have to think too much, so he can think his own thoughts. I really like when he does this gray tone art. Almost looks like David Lloyd or something. He does great things like this too. I love, like this comic starts off with, one night, 6 years after the end of this book, Danny Gray gets the two of us into a fight. He constantly refers to things, and then, like, it's amazing, even like 15, 20 years later, he'll remember a little thing he said and refer to it, which I guess we all do in our life, right? We remember just some weird thing out of the blue and be like, oh yeah, that's that's relevant here. So yeah, I really like the way he does that. But it's not confusing or anything. He definitely doesn't jump around so much where you're like, wait, what's going on now? So there's trouble with him and Danny sometimes arguing a little more. They're still hanging out all the time, but there's little cracks in their friendship. I guess Danny has this strange habit of waking up in the middle of the night drunk and just peeing anywhere. Peeing in someone's closet, peeing down the stairwell. So people who had Danny Gray over, they would lock their wardrobes. They knew. They'd put a chair up against the refrigerator so he couldn't pee in it. Yeah, I guess we do get to see the darker side of drinking where, this one guy just freaks out on his girlfriend. He gets all jealous because she has some flowers. He's like, where'd you get them? And starts slapping her around, and they got to stop him. So it's not all rum cakes and reach arounds in this drunken life. Though it does seem like a lot of fun. He makes it seem like a lot of fun. It seems weird. It's the local, almost like the ROTC, but for the Air Force. They asked the drunken idiots from the King Canoe crowd to help them with their maneuvers. Like, okay, you guys are gonna jump out and attack us. It's like war games. Luckily, no one gets shot. So Alec is still with Penny. He does little asides like this. The hard vision in the shaving mirror. A short story in 6 pictures having nothing to do with any of the previous stuff. And it's just, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but feel your eye socket through your skin and be like, oh my God, I'm going to be a skull one day. So he looks at his teeth and he can see his own mortality. And as he walks out the door, he says, good morning to Death, who gives him a good morning back. And then, literally has nothing to do with anything. And then he gets back to the story here. Well, now he starts talking about his work more. And I guess he even gets to read at work a lot, his downtime. So he kind of likes it, even though it's just working with sheet metal. Definitely, he's overqualified for this job. Of course, the whole time he's talking about writers and literature. We see there's a widening gulf between Danny and him. Penny's definitely not intellectual, so that's a rift between them. Some more of their crazy drunk friends, of course. What makes this way more palatable is just every 6th panel he'll just go off on a little aside and tell you about something that annoys him, a little bit of history or something. He gets in a big argument with Penny. Look at this interesting drawing here, using that childlike primitive style again. And he wakes up, once again, he's couch surfing. Wakes up to see Danny Gray peeing into Penny's handbag. And I guess Danny wakes up. And Alec actually laughs. He just says, he makes a joke about it. But Danny freaks out and starts pounding on Alec. Penny's in bed with him, and she tries to stop him. And she's like, Danny, stop. I've got no clothes on. He starts roughing her up. And Danny's still angry at him. Just keeps saying, you're so fucking smug. Everything's a big joke to you. And Alec actually tries to take him out. Which is pretty brave because he knows that Danny could kick the shit out of him. So just bad feelings all around. And now we see a flash forward. Eddie Campbell in Australia. The omniscient narrator says, Danny and Alec don't speak to each other for a whole year, mainly due to embarrassment after that night. If we could see the future 5 years after this, George Waite and Penny Moore would get married for a little while. Me today, I'm on the other side of the world, riding a greyhound down to Brisbane, Australia to find work. And so this is almost like a requiem for the King Canute crowd. Because it's pretty much that part of his life is kind of dying off. He imagines his funeral, and all these regulars are there. And for some reason, the superhero's there, and of course, death. Life goes on. The book stops here. So that was the end of the King Canute crowd. We have a little photo of young Eddie Campbell, quite the dapper little lady killer. Look at that. Look at that guy. He had no problems getting laid. Here's Graffiti Kitchen. This was, I believe, maybe the second book. I don't know. It's all published, like I said, it's published out of chronological order, but it's the narrative is in order. So this is a very much looser style, and let me see here. Apparently this began, he started drawing this in 1988, which is about like 6 years after he had all those early stories about the King Canute crowd. Some of those were even just published as minis. And so in 1980 he started Graffiti Kitchen, but it's still looking back to right after that King Canute era. And he says that he adopted the style of Glenn Dakin, the great English cartoonist, more loose style. He wanted a different style for this. We see Alec is pretty pleased with himself. He definitely has an ego. But he's clever enough to hide it for the most part, so he's not overbearing. Him and Penny's relationship's really deteriorating. And she's cheating on him, most probably, it sounds like. And this is a crazy story, because this is Alec talking about meeting a young girl when she's 13. And then when she's a little older, he starts dating her. And we even see a copy of Lolita here. And he knows her mother. He's friends with her. And it's weird, the mother's kind of encouraging him. I guess Alec is like, I don't know, young 20s, maybe mid-20s at this point. But they don't say exactly how old Georgette is. And I hope she's 18. Yeah, so it's so strange the mother's all like giving him pointers, like, you should ask her out. She really fancies you. Look how loose this is compared to that first story. It's almost like a sketchbook drawings. Georgette, the way he writes her dialogue and draws her, she does seem just adorable, you know? But it just doesn't work out with them. I mean, they do fool around a few times. And it just seems like it ends with recriminations. It doesn't end well. Sounds like she kind of cuts him loose. So then this is where it gets crazy, though. Then he ends up he starts shagging her mother, his friend. But he's obviously still thinking about Georgette. Some of these panels look great to me. This weird loose art. I love that little panel right there. Of course, it's talking about literature again. This is called Graffiti Kitchen because this woman, she's kind of a free spirit, Georgette's mom. And so she always has people over. They're always partying. So the kitchen is just covered in graffiti. She just tells people, grab a magic marker, draw on my walls if you want. Look at that, how loose that is. No zipatone in this, I'm pretty sure. Some of the mark making, though, looks really good, though. That looks great to me. This weird, almost like primitive chiaroscuro. Ultra primitive. So he seems to get along with the mother, but it does seem like, it's just like a nice little cozy relationship. It's not as exciting as Georgette, so he keeps thinking about Georgette. So it's totally fucked. Alec seems like he kind of wants to hang out with Georgette a little here and there, but Georgette basically took in a friend from school. She's living in the house. She was molested by her stepfather, so they kind of adopted her, and they're inseparable. So Alec seems annoyed by this. He can't ever talk to her one-on-one. Georgette gets mad at her mom. So I think she still has feelings for Alec, because she does seem like, I don't know, I guess some little jealousy going on. But she says all he can talk about is Penny Moore. So Alec is still stuck on Penny Moore, even though he doesn't talk about it. But I guess off screen, he is still pining for her, or at least fascinated. This definitely shows Alec not at his best, or Eddie Campbell, I should say, which I like. I love autobio, where it's like, yeah, I was kind of a pud, like Joe Matt type stuff, So Alex seems to be getting along pretty well with the mom. Alec gets fired along with Danny Gray. Danny Gray just punches the executive manager in the face when they fire him. That's a very Danny Gray thing to do. Interesting little panel there. I remember distinctly reading an Eddie Campbell story about Georgette. I think it was the first thing I ever read by Eddie Campbell. I think it was in that Anything Goes anthology, which there's a video for. It was the Fantagraphics benefit book. And it's not in this book. I'm positive. There's some little... So I guess this is in every single story. And it doesn't really... I don't remember it featuring Alec necessarily, but it's about Georgette. Almost like a poem about her. There's some run-ins he has with Georgette where there definitely seems to be some tension still. And one night when he's staying at the mom's house, He wakes up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and Georgette's in the hall, and they kiss. But that's it. It's a very tantalizing tale. Probably inappropriate, but it is just crazy. And I guess that's what love does. Love is the author of many interesting stories. So finally, Georgette kind of comes clean. And she basically, I think they might be getting back together or trying to. And Georgette's like, why'd you fuck it all up by dating my mom, by fucking my mom? You know, that's fucking weird. We probably would have gotten back together if you didn't do that. Very un-Eddie Campbell like panel there. It really stands out from the loosest of all the other art. Having that heavy black panel, heavily inked. So every time he runs in with Georgette, it doesn't really go well. They both kind of are angry at each other. Doesn't seem like Alec is as joyful as he was in the first book. There's a photo of Georgette, or at least Eddie Campbell's approximation of it. And then he says it's time to reintroduce the King Canute crowd. So he's going back. And Georgette's there with her friend, Amy, and some other kids. When they all split to go somewhere, Georgette makes him to jump in the van, in the back of the van with Alec. And here's where she really confronts him about the whole, like, how you fucked it up. But nothing happens. The whole time is Alec keeps ranting about how he's a mythical beast. He's really kind of full of himself in this one. But it is kind of like ironic. I mean, he's also just like, yeah, I'm a fucking wreck. But it's almost heroic how, what a fuck up I am. And he has I think this is the last time he sees Georgette. She says, what are you going to do? And Alex says, I'm just getting out. I'm going to go somewhere else. So now I'm basically, I think he broke up with the mom here. Janie, I should have mentioned that earlier. And now she kind of knows that Georgette still likes him and he still likes her. So he's just, as her friend, his friend again, once again, he's just like, Alec, you really shouldn't pursue Georgette. She's going to break your heart. It's amazing this woman isn't just like, fuck you, you piece of shit. You want to fuck my daughter now? I guess he did first, you know, so. The mom definitely does seem, she seems jealous. But she ends up just saying, ask her out. You'll find out. She's gonna rip your fucking heart to shreds. If you think there's something between you, amazing, the honesty of this. It's like, I'd just be mortified. It's an interesting panel too. These tendrils coming out. So definitely this one takes a darker tone. So I guess Janie sells the house. Alec helps her, fix it up for the sale. And he's tearing up the kitchen, getting all that shit off the walls. And he sees this quote, "I like people quite well at a little distance." And he assumes it's Georgette's. He says, "It sounds like Georgette's style. I like to see them passing and going their own way. And yet I don't want them to come near." Turns out it's not. It's D.H. Lawrence. But it does kind of sum up Georgette. So Janie and Georgette and the whole Amy girl, they all take off. He meets Danny. They're both out of work. So they don't hate each other, but it's definitely strained between them. They haven't seen each other in a while. They just see each other infrequently. He's at a low point where he just bursts out into tears when he's sitting in his room. This is definitely not the same guy from the first book. He actually goes in to say hi to Penny Moore. She's totally got a boyfriend now, but she's quite kind to him. She even agrees to have a coffee with him. And some drunken idiot comes up and is harassing Alec. So Alec does the one move he knows how to do, and he starts bopping this guy's head into the pavement. That little moment makes me laugh all the harder, and I banged the idiot's head again for good measure. Mythical. Truly mythical. And he draws himself as some kind of weird minotaur. Here's a nice little weird collage using Zipatone and photo stuff. Flick. That was the name of a fanzine that he used to put out with a guy. So here's some shorts. And one of these, the first story appeared in Escape, the great English comics magazine. And the other one, How to Avoid Sex, was actually supposed to be used in like a class to discuss sexuality with 14-year-olds, and they rejected it. They didn't like it. So this is not... Sorry about that, guys. Let me get some water. As you can see, this is not autobiographical. It's about a guy named Charlie. And for the first time, he goes to visit his girlfriend's parents. And it's the typical situation of the father thinks he's a total moron, chucklehead. And Charlie does seem to be quite the moron and chucklehead. There's this thing where like these butterflies keep appearing. I don't know what it symbolizes. Maybe his embarrassment? I'm not quite sure. But as you can see, very different style. Like he's being cartoony. Here's that How to Avoid Sex. He says, this professor type says, before AIDS, the scariest thing about sex was sex itself. You know, the losing of control, fear of being vulnerable. Kind of showing all these lovers who get interrupted, but they're almost grateful. They're like, ooh, that was scary. And so now we see Alec. And here's just a little funny story about Danny and Alec. Here's How to Be an Artist. This is the next book. As you can see, we're getting away from that sketchy look here. And this is a really interesting, fun one, especially if you're a comic fan, because it gives us a lot of insider baseball about the comic industry and cartoonists. So we definitely see about, he talks about his own career, making little fanzines. There's that flick, which itself is a reference to comic lore. Did you guys know you could never use the word flick in a comic because the printing was so bad, the L and the I might turn into a U and look like fuck. Also, you weren't supposed to have Clint, even though Hawkeye's name was Clint. But that was also, you're risking. There's that market I was talking about, fast fiction. That was the English mart where guys would sell their fanzines and their little mini comics. So this talks about him, trying to get gigs in the NME. We see little cameos from Myra Hancock, an English cartoonist at the time. This is copyright Cusack. I guess he was another cartoonist. I don't know what this is. A very interesting little glyph here. Talking about the mail art movement. And we do, during this story, Eddie will meet his future wife, which he tells us right off the bat. She's from Australia. And they hit it off pretty quickly. Very, very quickly, he even proposes to her. Her name's Annie, by the way. Now we see Danny looks a little older, or maybe Eddie Campbell's art style's changed. But he doesn't look as young and studly anymore. He refers to him as his quote-unquote mentor from 5 years before. So definitely some time has flown by here. So there's this guy, he calls him the man at the crossroads. This is the guy who published the Escape magazine. Just a big cheerleader for comics, for the medium. And if you've ever seen Escape magazine, guys, if you ever can get your hands on them, buy them. And no matter what the price is, they're really hard to find. Amazingly great comics magazine. So he basically takes Eddie under his wing. He likes his work a lot. He's like, I want you in my magazine. And we see Ryan Hughes, we see Shaky Kane. I'm pretty sure this is Eddie Campbell actually drawing their comics, redrawing them, but maybe he just reprinted them. I'm not sure. Savage Pencil here. And so while he's getting into this world, small press world, him and Annie are falling deeper and deeper in love. It seems like they're having the time of their life. Now Alec starts talking about, what is comics art. And we see Alan Moore here. Who, of course, will play a much bigger part later. So basically just talking about his philosophy about the medium. Here we see Hunt Emerson. He was referred to him as Wee Hunt Emerson. Art Spiegelman. I'm pretty sure that's photocopied. Yeah, I guess these are all photocopied. There's Miracle Man, because he's talking about Alan Moore. Showing Alan Moore's early stuff that he did for Sounds magazine. You guys, if you can find these on the internet, under the name Kurt Vile, it's pretty amazing underground stuff. It's great. There's his early Maxwell the Magic Cat strip by Alan Moore. So Alan Moore gets the strip, then he starts getting more successful. So he just talks about Alan Moore for a little bit. And there's a lot of stuff I've never heard of before. So this is like some insider baseball stuff. Alan Moore and his wife Phyllis would have these crazy parties. So it's very slow going. Alec isn't making any headway with sounds. He gave him a tryout strip. They didn't like it. But eventually one of the cartoonists quits and he gets the gig. So he'll have a weekly strip with sounds. So then chapter 3, Annie has to return to Australia. I guess there's a family crisis or something. And he's definitely not happy about this. He gets a bunch of odd jobs. He really just wants to be a cartoonist now. But he's got to pay the rent, so. So his name is getting out there. People seem to know on the scene. There's Glenn Dakin, by the way. Glenn Dakin's getting kind of successful. And, but, you know, there's no money at all. You can't get anyone to publish him. Well, you can, but there's no money in it. Those guys from Escape are championing him, but it doesn't really matter. Oh, so he flies out to Australia. He surprises Annie. And basically just seems to, it's northern Australia, so it's like living in the tropics. It's just, sounds like paradise. And then he just goes off on a little side about this old songwriter from Australia. A little interesting anecdote about him. Pretty soon the comic will become just that. It'll be less autobio and more just Eddie Campbell telling us interesting little stories from history and pop culture and stuff. So Annie and him return to England. And we just basically see his cartooning career slowly, inch by inch, progress. Hangs out with Danny Gray again. Of course, lots of drinking ensues. He's invited to a museum show. It's the mid-'80s where comics are getting, it was kind of the hip thing. Comics were kind of hip. So it was like for a year or two in England, if you were doing comics, you could get some attention. And yet, he's not. So it's really starting to frustrate him. He sees all these other contemporaries getting all this cool shit. Look at all these guys. John Holmstrom, Mark Beyer, Linda Barry. Talked about Alan Moore again. I guess Alan Moore is now writing Swamp Thing. He's becoming a star. Escape hires him to interview Alan Moore for Escape magazine. So I think that's when they really, they've met before, but you know, that solidifies things a little. There's Myra Hancock again. So everyone's getting these hip gigs, but nothing for him. He looks pretty angry there. That's some weird shading. And by weird, I mean bad. It's just really interesting reading this history from, you know, someone who was there. Because I don't really know much about the English comic scene at that time. What I do know is from Escape. More Glenn Dakin. This weird guy named Wigan. But like hip magazines like ID Magazine were publishing all these little underground cartoonists. because it was super cool at the time. This is Alan Moore talking at a convention. Here's what's this more savage pencil. He starts a comic strip with Phil Elliott in Sounds. But basically, whenever there's a new editor there, they want a clean house. So after a year or two, new editor comes in and says, I don't like your comic strip. You're out. Here's an actual little guest appearance from Glenn Dakin. A card. And once again, we see a little Crazy Cat Harriman homage. So more about just the man at the crossroads. I don't think he ever tells us his name. I could look it up, but I forgot his name. Oh, it's probably Paul Gravett or someone like that. One of those great historians. Pretty sure he was involved with Escape. Now he flashes back to being a youngster and discovering comic books for the first time. Also just discovering books about comics. There was this bookstore that had a little shelf just about the history of comics, and he would just devour this stuff. So here we see a total montage of all the classics. Milton Caniff, Winsor McKay. He has some very obscure ones in here. Alex Kotsky, John Streibel. Not the biggest names, but really talented guys. So this goes on for a few pages. So I never realized, like, Eddie Campbell really is a hardcore, like, comic fanatic. Like, he's a fan. And, you know, even back when he was younger, he was thinking about, like, this shit is a valid art form. I want to be part of it. I want to be part of this lineage. So that's pretty much this chapter. It's a very interesting chapter if you're a comic fan. Lots of insider dope. And I wish I could get into it more. God, I'm not even halfway through this book, guys. I'm on page 252. Now he's looking at earlier precursors of cartooning throughout history. Humorous cartooning. See these sculptures, hundreds of years old. So he's definitely put a lot of thought into this, you know. Trying to find the sui generis of cartoons, comics. These great Native American face masks. Apparently this guy is from 1640, which looks really crazy. I want to see more of this Bernini guy. So Alec has to move. Him and Annie move. And Annie's pregnant. They're gonna have a kid. So Alec's pretty damn happy, even though he wants more to happen with his cartooning career. Looks like we're getting sketchy again. So basically, in a very entertaining way, he just tells us about his progress. Oh, then I got in this magazine, this anthology. I remember that gag comic. I never picked it up, though. And very slowly, he's selling a few more books here and there. Getting more of a name for himself. All the whole time waiting for his baby to be born. So Alan Moore is now a full-on rock star. Showing up in his white suit everywhere. There's another Stephen Bissett. This is actually an original drawing by Steve Bissett. It says, "To Eddie and Annie, 1985. So he drew this for them when he stayed at their house. Oh, I'm sorry, this is what this is about. Stephen Bissett's at his house. This is when he sells his Pajama Girl story to Taboo, which we'll read very shortly. That was Eddie Campbell kind of doing a horror crime story. So people are definitely, cartoonists know who he is, but he's still not really making much money. He's hanging out with Alan Moore a lot. Of course, they talk about comics all the time. And it just keeps going. Tells us about all the graphic novel successes of the mid-'80s. Watchmen, Mouse. And now comics are getting super hip in England. So guys, if this video just ends, this is my plan. I don't know how much longer my battery's gonna hold up, but I'm just gonna I'll have a part 2 video, and I'll put it up as quick as I can. But I just wanted to warn you, this might have an abrupt ending, this video. Chapter 10, just more of the same. Telling us about the comics industry in the 80s. Well, the art comics industry mostly. Eddie gets invited to this international comic festival. So people are impressed with Eddie Campbell's work. I mean, just like I was. I mean, especially back then, nobody was doing what he was doing. This is way before the autobio surge in the 90s, you know? And there's that daft bugger Alec McGarry still asleep at the turnpike. So he keeps using this as a metaphor or analogy for various things. Still not really getting any paying gigs. But people know who he is and they respect his work. He gets to meet Hugo Pratt. Sounds like some good times if you're a comic geek. So this is him going to all these comic conventions and festivals in Europe and other places. There's a Hunt Emerson drawing Eddie Campbell there. Yeah, this is full on getting sketchy now. Look at this. He gets the job done though for this kind of story, you know? Because it is just like a light, breezy discussion where he's just like, and then this happened. And he still, though, is very good at observing things, putting in little details that make it interesting. And so it goes. Comics just keep getting hipper and hipper. All the magazines are writing about graphic novels, the hottest new art form. Talks about Neil Gaiman coming up, Frank Miller, Dark Knight. And his Alec books keep being published by Escape to no acclaim. They don't sell that well. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle phenomena. So now he's going to move to Australia, live rent-free for a year. I guess mail his stuff in, but he doesn't want to leave because he feels like he's just about to break. And if you're not in England, you can't really, it's hard to break into the comic scene, you know? So he's going to be off in Australia. And he realizes he probably needs some distance. He's worried that he's murdered his muse, that he has no muse left. He's not as passionate about drawing and creating. But he always just looks at his old comic clippings, and they inspire him, all the great masters. Frank King, George Harriman. Once again, it drips. In a vast silent Arizona desert, a coconino moon pours out molten silver. And here we see the George Harriman panel, but it drips onto Alec McGarry asleep at the turnpike. And he says, take your seats for the final act. We start with this quote from R.G. Collingwood. And then we get into, I believe in this chapter, Eddie finally makes some inroads. Once again, we see Alan Moore. He's a fucking huge rock star now. Comic writer. This is around the time when Alan Moore's like, I'm never going to a convention again. Fuck this shit. He does us a lot of behind the scenes stuff about his, dealings with DC, how he started his own imprint, Mad Love, for a little while, because he was just sick of the corporate comics thing. There's a great illustration by Dave Sim. Dave Sim at the time was running around telling everyone they should self-publish. He's like, there's no reason why you shouldn't. And we see Steve Bissette drawing. Some of these are super rare. I think these were published in the newsletter for like these creator rights guys. Eastman Laird. So they really changed the game. Just two guys who own their creation became millionaires. And then he tells us the whole behind the scenes story about Alan Moore's comic Big Numbers, which has been so controversial over the years. So much rumors about it and stories and just urban legends about it. It's a really interesting little aside. I've read a lot about it, like various fanzines over the years, but this had some stuff I never heard of. Like, oh, and this is how he heard it, but I never quite heard it this way. Talk about all the stuff without Columbia burning the pages of the 4th issue. This is just a silly thing where a character named Betty is friends with Bill Sienkiewicz, or is dealing with him. He draws her like Betty, and then there happens to be a woman named Veronica, who I guess Sienkiewicz was dating at the time, so he draws her like Veronica. So yeah, they tell us the whole sordid story, recriminations and everything. It's So of course, Big Numbers never finished. It was a kind of a failure. Talks about all the other guys. Bissette making his own Tyrant comic. It was basically the age of self-publishing. Alan Moore talks about meeting Harvey Kurtzman at a comic festival. Harvey Kurtzman wasn't doing that good at that time. He's pretty old and frail. More about Al Columbia. He draws Al Columbia with this. That's how he draws them. And that's it. Wait, did I skip the last page? No. Okay, now we have Little Italy. So now Eddie Campbell's in Australia, and he's going to start writing about it. So this definitely a shift in tone happens here. It's going to be less, minute observations of everyday life. More just like little, maybe still very observations of life, but just kind of random things that strike his fancy. It's like those first 3 books, we really learned who Alec McGarry was, i.e. Eddie Campbell. But this is more just like him kind of saying, here's this thing in Australia that's interesting. A termite mound. And the art seems a little slicker. He's actually using rulers and stuff. He's pointing out all these interesting things about Australia. Now we get the Pajama Girl, which appeared in Taboo. And this is a true crime story of back in the 30s, I believe, 20s. Some woman died. It's a very complicated story, which I don't really want to get into. But it's basically, they couldn't identify her for years. Look at this crazy... Because they never knew who the murderer was, so Eddie Campbell just draws him as some abstract... Almost looks like he could be the cousin of my pal Food Food from the Shags or something. This weird primitive art. It's a pretty interesting story, but it's all filtered through Alec as he's reading it. The way he draws her is very, I don't know, like, not really Mark Beyer, but some art is like that. Like, for some reason, he draws the Pajama Girl like this. Almost, like through the Habit Trails guy. It almost looks like Jeff Nicholson or something. Really different than his style. But it's just so convoluted, the story. Then there's another lady did 3 years, and 3 years later, then they think maybe it's the same woman. Yada, yada. It's just crazy. Now we have just little one-page gags about his new father-in-law. He lives with his in-laws, Jack. He really seems to like Jack. Jack seems like a pretty cool guy. They seem to get along. This is a great anecdote. Jack, who was a trial lawyer before he was retired, tells Alec these great stories about like fucking with the judge and getting his client off with various a little chicanery. Really fun story. Yeah, he's pretty much put the Zipatone away at this point, as you can see. It's an interesting effect to get the ocean, to get the rippling waves. So a lot of these are like 1 or 2 page gags, basically. Things I learned at college. And here's Little Italy, what the book is named after. I guess this section of Australia, a lot of Italian immigrants have lived there. They play bocce all the time. There's good Italian food everywhere. So now Alec is just kind of like an anthropologist, telling us all about this area. Here's him just drawing various trees, and then just like, I give up. The author discovers artifacts of lost civilization in a dream. That's just a dream he had. This happened last night. Him just basically waking up with this fear of his own mortality. The author is coerced into doing real work like they used to do in olden times, where Andy's basically like, that's not real work. Go mow the lawn. Help. My mom's doing it, for God's sakes. Be a man. And he runs over a little critter. More of these kind of gag strips. Just about him dealing with his father-in-law. Talking to the doctor. Oh wait, sorry about that. I didn't... Talking to the doctor here. Look how Lucy's here. I suspect some Phil Elliott in there. Yarns he heard in pubs. An article about, or a comic about the horror comics of the 50s. Just weird birds of Australia. These are drawn really interestingly, I think. I just love that ibis. It's so simple. So as you can see, very different than the first 3 books. This is the Pajama Girl's big night out. And so we found another little anecdote about the Pajama Girl. And when they were trying to ID the body. It was actually kind of horrific. His daughter, now we get a lot of cutesy strips with his daughter in it. How adorable she is, and, kids say funny things. Look at the art in this one, 1,600 miles by coach. He's on a big bus trip, and some really interesting lines on the paper here. This is, I kind of like it. It's just really abstract and weird. Captain Oblivion's Christmas visit. This is Glenn Dakin comes to visit them. And here, that was the end of that book. So now we have the Dead Muse. So this is right where Little Italy breaks off. Or I'm sorry, ends. And as you can see, things are more back to how they were. He's using Zipatone again. And this is just continuing their life in Australia. And also talking about Alec's career. How he's, he's putting out Dead Face now, which will become known as Bacchus. I kind of like this art. Not as much as the early stuff, though. I like him when he tightens up a little. Him trying to get work, his cartooning isn't paying the bills for sure. So he's trying to get other kinds of jobs. But it does sound like Eddie Campbell is just basically a lazy guy who just doesn't want to have a job. He just can't really do it. Look at this weird thing with the Zipatone here. I don't know if it's an accident or he was doing it on purpose, but it's misregistered. This Zipatone shading. Actually, I think it's an accident. I can't imagine why he'd do that. There's some statement. Talking about he kind of becomes part of the Australian comic scene. Tells us a little about some of those guys in Australia. The guys behind like Fox Comics. And apparently Australia has a really dinky comic industry. Or even scene. There's just not that many cartoonists out there. Comics being published. This is all interesting. Not as fun as the early stuff. But, I mean, his life isn't as interesting, That's why I love this book. Like, you're really just seeing this guy's life pass before your eyes. This is really a full life omnibus. So now he's domestic. He's married with a kid. He's not going out carousing anymore, getting into crazy misadventures. Here's that Glenn Dakin, some sketches he did. And now we have The Dance of Lifey Death, which was published as a book. I believe Dark Horse published this. Yep, she did. This is from 1989. Around the World in 80 Frames. That's a great title. So this is about him touring the world. He's starting to finally get some fame for his comics, and he's getting invited to comic conventions. And hobnobbing with all these comic guys. Check out the time here. Oh my god, it's still recording. This might break the 2-hour mark, guys. If it'll let me. I might have to continue it in another video, like I said. So this is all kind of interesting, especially if you're a comic geek, Him meeting all these various people from around the world. Look at this great use of the Zipatone collage effect. He's one of the few guys I know who does that. Of course, there's stories about, not connecting flights and having to sleep over in airports like people always do when they have these travel logs. And then he finally returns home to Brisbane. Next we have Obsession. Definitely drawn in a tighter style. Look at that there. That is not the usual Eddie Campbell panel. And this I'm talking about being a collector. Now, we recently read this story. I can't remember where. Maybe it was in the Best American Comics, one of those things. But this is about Eddie Campbell meeting his buddy who is a collector. And he's rich enough to be able to collect some cool shit. So whenever Eddie visits him, he kind of vicariously lives through him. He checks out his comic room. He's got a whole room of his comic collection. But the main thing is he collects wines. Very fancy wines. And it drives Eddie crazy because he lets them sit too long. So these wines will basically turn to vinegar before he opens them. So it's about his struggles whenever he hangs out there. He's always trying to sneak a bottle of wine. And be like, come on, let's eat this for dinner. It's going bad. So he gets really frustrated with this guy. Yeah, I wish I could remember. I think in the past few months it was on the channel. This is another cutesy one about the daughter. This one I actually really like. Just how weird kids are. His daughter goes up to him one day and says, "Daddy, God was killed today. I saw it at the lights. He was crossing the road and he had his eyes closed and a car ran him over." And this is very close to the time when he had a car accident. Somebody hit his bicycle. Genetic defects. So a lot of these cutesy kid strips. But, you know, they're better than most because Eddie Campbell's smarter, cleverer than most, guys in the Sunday funnies. Here's another, just him illustrating a yarn about some guys who tried to scam the newspapers with the story of a kangaroo girl who grew up raised by kangaroo. It was all a hoax. Really fun stories. So here's, like I said, he's really just getting into this, like, oh, I heard this interesting story. I read this in an old book. And then he's making a comic about it. Here's Obsession Revisited, where he goes back to that rich doctor's house who's the collector. And just shows what an interesting character this guy is. Memento Vita. This is about his... Eddie Campbell at the time was totally getting into wines, becoming a real wine connoisseur. And a lot of the stories will actually revolve just around wine. Another fun story from his life. A pub far away. I guess he still gets to the pub every now and then. This is William Tell, where he's telling his kid about the William Tell legend. I don't know why, but this lettering is so amazing to me. It's so striking. It's so different than anything he's done. That's why I like Eddie Campbell's stuff. You could tell that he was just like, I'm bored. I have the same kind of logo. I'm going to see how this looks. He's always trying stuff. There's like so many different styles in this book. The Great Booby Outrage. This is Your Lunch. More cutesy kid stuff. Position Vacant. This is an interesting strip. Characters needed to fill panels. Previous holders of the position. We see Bacchus. We see some of his old characters. And it says the successful applicants will not partially fill panels, crawl between panels sideways like a crab, walk brittle along the tops of panels, or fall through panels and off the page. Applications may be made ready to Eddie Campbell. I like that one a lot. That's like something Joe Matt would have done, you know, when he's doing his one-pagers. Look at that weird, this art for this cat here. It's this cat statue. So just, as you can see, these are all just like 1, 2, 3-page little things, little stories. It almost seems like that's the pace of life, you know. When you're younger, everything streams together into some like epic narrative. You're like, the days are just like, oh yeah, hanging out at that bar. But, you know, I think you get older, you start working, and you just have little stories pop up here and there, and in between the drudgery of your daily life. Yeah, like I said, guys, big book. Just kind of want to show you stuff. Here's another one about wine. Even though this guy's not making a lot of money, he's like blowing all this money on fancy wines. Like he's really in fancy wines. Here's this crazy collector friend. I love this. Annie's cashing a check that Eddie got from Fantagraphics, and they actually have an R. Crumb drawing on their check. The official Fantagraphics business check. And here's the Dance of Lifey Death. And I guess this is uses some words from Edward Lear, a 19th century writer. Some nice panels in here. Basically, Eddie's talking about, Alec's talking about things that are going on at the time: Bosnia, Somalia, Waco, Texas. And he's thinking about death. And then he uses this Edward Lear story about these little kids who went to sea in a sieve. Kind of an analogy. And I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. I'm gonna make a second video. I'll try to splice it. If I don't succeed in my editing, then I guess these will be two separate videos. But either way, these should be up relatively shortly, either this one or the extended one when I splice the two things together. So thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you very shortly. Bye.